I'm often asked, admittedly mostly by Hull City fans I suspect, to make more videos about the currently not so mighty Tigers. I've only ever done so once, and when I did, it was a video about the fates of our 2016-17-11 since the club's relegation, which meant I could stick either Harry Maguire or Andy Robertson on the thumbnail and draw in some non-Hull City interest. By and large, I refuse to make videos about Hull City because they won't get many views. My boss will ask why the channel isn't making any money, I'll get sacked, and I'll end up setting up my own channel profiling footballers from the 1930s that about 7 of you will watch. On this unusual occasion though, seeing as though we are living in unusual times, I've decided to relent and make a video about the football club I hold closest to my heart and the current predicament that we are in. Now, some of you may be aware that all is not well at Hull City, and some of you may not. Some of you may have a fleeting memory of our owners trying to change our name to Hull Tigers, and some of you may just have thought we'd fallen from grace following a few seasons in the Premier League and were making a natural return to the depths of the lower league game from which we rose in the early to mid-2000s. The predicaments of clubs who are mismanaged and their ownership struggles tend to be largely unknown. Most football fans in England, for example, are likely to know that Coventry City have been kicked out of their stadium in recent years and that Bury were kicked out of the EFL earlier this season. But they're unlikely to know the specifics of how those problems came about, the individuals involved, and how those problems manifested to such a degree. It's a bit like colorectal cancer or wildfires. We all agree that they're bad, but it tends to only be when they directly start to impact or affect you that people really start to take note. It's just human nature. Most people care more about themselves than other people, and by extension, they tend to care more about their own football teams than other teams. Even in a sea of misunderstood plights though, I think the tribulations at Hull City are almost uniquely unknown or misunderstood outside of the club's own support base. For a long time, I think an awful lot of football fans couldn't quite understand what Hull City fans were complaining about. In most cases, the gripes of supporters can be quite clearly linked to performances on the pitch, whether it be a lack of investment in the playing squad or displeasure at the man in charge of the team. Unusually though, much of the grievances among Hull City supporters arose during the most successful period in the club's history on the pitch. It took a few years for those issues at the top to filter down to the playing side of the team's operations, and I think that made it a little bit trickier for outsiders, and even indeed some Hull City fans, to understand why people were unhappy. Just 5 seasons ago, Hull City were playing in the Europa League, and it's less than 3 years since we were most recently relegated from the Premier League. That isn't long at all, but it feels like a lifetime ago for a club that has gradually had the life sucked out of it season upon season. I apologise in advance, but to understand Hull City's current predicament, I'm going to have to provide a quick 30-second history lesson. When I started supporting Hull City at the start of the 2000s, the club was languishing in the 4th tier of English football, had only recently avoided a drop into the non-league game, and hadn't tasted promotion since the mid-1980s. Our ownership situation had lumbered from the disinterested to the spiteful, with the occasional crook along the way, until Adam Pearson came along in 2001. In 2002, Hull City left Boothroyd Park in a move to the KC Stadium, and 3 promotions in 5 years saw the club rise from the 4th tier up into the Premier League for the first time in our then 104-year history. Pearson had sold the club in 2007, and the consortium that came in racked up significant debts over the next 3 seasons. When Hull City were relegated from the Premier League in 2010, the club was said to be facing a perilous financial crisis. Around the same time, Portsmouth was sailing into the financial abyss following reckless spending, and there were fears that the Tigers could be heading towards the same fate. At the 11th hour, in stepped local multi-millionaire businessman Assem Alam, writing off the club's high interest debts in exchange for full ownership of the club in a move he said made little business sense, but one he considered to be, quote, my present to my locality. Hull City fans breathed a sigh of relief. Assem Alam became one of the most popular men in Hull, and the Tigers consolidated in the Championship. The first feeling of unease between some Hull City fans and their owner came following the sacking of club legend Nick Barmby. Barmby had retired from football in order to replace Nigel Pearson as manager of the club, and the circumstances of his dismissal left a slightly bitter taste in the mouth for some. There's nothing like results to quiet and displease football fans though, and in his first season in charge, Barmby's replacement Steve Bruce won promotion to the Premier League. The following season, the Tigers finished 16th, their highest ever top-flight league finish, as well as reaching the first FA Cup final in the club's history. That gave the club qualification to the Europa League the following season, and I can honestly say that when I first went to see Hull City play Rochdale at Boothroyd Park in the 4th tier, not many people there thought they'd ever see the club in an FA Cup final or entering a European competition alongside the likes of Liverpool, Ajax and Fiorentina. You can see then that Assem Alam's popularity in the city of Hull ought to have been stratospheric. but this unprecedented on-field success took place with a backdrop of discontent among large sections of the Hull City support. It was during the summer of 2013, following the club's promotion to the Premier League and at the start of the following season, that Asim Alam announced his intention to start rebranding the club as Hull Tigers nationally and internationally, and as Hull City Tigers locally. Supporters were not consulted on this decision, which seemed to stem largely from the club's owners being denied the right to acquire the KC Stadium from Hull City Council. A not insignificant number of Hull City fans weren't too pleased with the announcement, and tensions were further flared when Mr. Alam stated, quote, "Hull City is irrelevant. It is common. I want the club to be special. It's about identity. City is a lousy identity. Hull City Association Football Club is so long." Unquote. An opposition supporters group called City Till We Die was formed in response to the announcement, and when asked if he had any thoughts on the new group, the businessman said they, quote, "can die as soon as they want, as long as they leave the club the majority who just want to watch good football." Unquote. As you might expect, that did little to heal any wounds, and in the 2014-15 season, some supporters began to boycott matches. For the first time, Hull City didn't have sellout crowds in the Premier League every week, as the average dropped below 24,000 for the first time in a top-flight season for the Tigers. Relegation exacerbated the problem, as supporters who had perhaps been uneasy with some of the issues but had been able to overlook them due to unprecedented on-field success could no longer cite the latter as a defence. The following season, Hull City managed to win promotion from the Championship, but still recorded their lowest average attendance for a Championship season at the KC Stadium. The average was just shy of 17,199, lower than the club's previous 6 seasons at that level, which had involved relegation scraps. Over the following summer, Steve Bruce resigned from his role as manager of the club due to a breakdown in the relationship between himself and the club's vice chairman Ehab Alam, who had by this time taken over the day-to-day running of the club from his father. To give an idea of how unusual that is, I'm not sure if any of you can think of a manager who has resigned without having any other job lined up after winning promotion with their team to the Premier League. There may be another, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but undoubtedly, it is extremely rare. The 2016 pre-season campaign could reasonably be described as the most shambolic of any team going into the Premier League ever. Whilst most teams strengthened out of life in the Premier League, Hull City had been significantly weakened. For the season opener, the Tigers faced the reigning Premier League champions Leicester City with only 11 senior outfield players available to them. It made Mike Thielen's team selection pretty easy, and bizarrely, his team recorded an unlikely win, although it wouldn't be one of many for Sir Alex Ferguson's former assistant. He was later replaced by Marco Silva, who couldn't keep the club in the Premier League, and a wrecking ball has been taken to the Hull City squad in every transfer window since. It was also during the summer of 2016 that the club announced a new ticket scheme, replacing season tickets with membership passes, which will be paid on a monthly basis. In theory, it was actually quite a good idea, but the Alams also decided to scrap concessionary tickets, thus making Hull City the only club in either the Premier League or the EFL to offer no discount for children, students, or old age pensioners. Whether you were 3 years old, 30 years old, or 93 years old, you would pay the same price for your membership. Attendances plummeted once again, down to 20,761 in the Premier League, 15,557 in the Championship, 12,340 last season, and just 11,614 this season. Given the way in which those figures are inflated, Hull City actually had a similar attendance in the 2016-17 Premier League season as they did in the 2003-04 season in the 4th tier, and certainly their current crowds in the 2nd tier are at best half the size of the crowds that the club had in the 4th tier. That is not normal. I suspect there is no other team during the Premier League era who have had similar average attendances in the 4th tier of English football as they had in the top flight. Portsmouth may come close, but outside of that I'm struggling. That rather highlights the fact that the gripes of many Hull City fans are not entirely performance related. Nevertheless, there are now plenty of on-field gripes for supporters to have. Since their most recent relegation from the Premier League, fans have been told that the club will have to cut its cloth accordingly. Since then, the club has sold Champions League winner Andy Robertson, the world's most expensive defender Harry Maguire, and arguably the outstanding player in the Championship in the form of Jarrod Bowen. High earners without significant sell-on value have been allowed to leave on freeze once their contracts expired, with the aim of replacing them with relatively inexpensive young players with potential future sell-on value. It's not a terrible policy, just look at the success of Brentford, but it has to be done with a modicum of ambition and intelligence. For the last couple of transfer windows, Hull City have almost exclusively signed League One players. That is to say, players who have only ever played well in League One, although some had experience playing in the Championship without success. The club also recruited a League One manager in the summer after Nigel Adkins resigned, like Steve Bruce, as he felt the owner's visions for the future of the club weren't aligned with his own plans. A squad of League One players was able to get lost in mid-table obscurity thanks to the brilliance of Jared Bowen, but following his departure, along with that of Kamil Grosicki, Hull City haven't won a single game. In the calendar year of 2020, Hull City's form has been among the worst of any team on earth. Before the EFL season was suspended, the Tigers were surely heading for relegation from the Championship and a first stint in League One since 2005, and you can bet that the average attendance won't be over 18,000 this time out. Whether the Football League season resumes or whether Hull City hang on for another season, they will almost certainly find themselves in League One once the EFL season is complete. Yet more first team players are out of contract in the summer, and hopes of a sale of the club remain limited at best. What is most cripplingly irritating about Hull City's journey over the last 7 or 8 years is the sheer number of opportunities to put things right. For every ill-considered name change, new badge and scrapping of concessions, it would have been relatively easy to look at the reaction from many fans and say, okay, it looks like we got it wrong on this one. Just look at Vincent Tan's colour change at Cardiff City, where wounds were healed. Slight efforts were made at the start of this season to heal some wounds, presumably due to the drastic drop-off in revenue, but the relationship between the owners and fans at Hull City is now surely too fractious to ever be recovered. Many will never forgive them, and the fact that they don't seem genuinely determined to sell the club, or at least not at a reasonable price, only adds insult to injury. That is what is irritating, but what is sad is the extent to which the last decade has been a lost opportunity. Hull is a decent-sized city with an enormous catchment area. For a long time, Hull City fans had little to shout about, but for a decade or more, they were given that chance. Premier League football arrived, and for many years, the Tigers were the highest-ranked football club in Yorkshire. If well managed, a huge new young generation of football fans could have been brought in and have fallen in love with the club. Instead, attendance and support has been decimated despite unprecedented success, and local young kids will most likely grow up supporting Liverpool, Manchester United, or one of the Yorkshire teams that has overtaken us in recent years. Achievements on the field have resulted in no lasting legacy anywhere to be seen, with new depths yet to be reached. Hopefully this video has gone some way towards explaining the current predicament at Hull City and how the club has declined so steeply both on the field and in the stands for the extremely small number of you likely to watch this. I ought to reiterate that the views expressed in this video, as always, are my own, and the Hull City fanbase, like all fanbases, is likely to be a broad church of opinions. If doing this job has taught me anything, it's that there is a person for every opinion, so there's probably someone out there who thinks all is well at the KCOM Stadium and that the owners, management and players are all doing a stellar job. In a 2013 interview, Asim Alam said, quote, "In a few years many clubs will follow and change their names to something more interesting, and I will have proved I am a leader," unquote, before adding that if he were the owner of Manchester City, he would change their name to Manchester Hunter. That was 7 years ago now, and I can't think of a single Premier League team, or team from any of Europe's Big Five leagues, who has followed Mr. Alam's lead. Manchester City have surprisingly persisted with the irrelevant and lousy suffix of City, much to their detriment, and have as a result been relegated many times since then. What? Oh. Well, apparently they haven't. Apparently they've won the Premier League title more times than any other team during that time, and have won more domestic trophies, setting numerous records in the process. Who'd have thought it? At all times, particularly during this current climate though, the struggles of football fans pale in insignificance when compared to the more serious struggles in life, and even the struggles of Hull City fans pale in insignificance when compared to a handful of clubs who have it even worse. I will therefore halt this video before it turns into a rant, as it surely would at some stage, and wish you all good health over the coming weeks, months, and indeed years. I have no idea how many of you will be working from home, social distancing, or self-isolating now, or in the coming weeks, but hopefully HITC Sevens can provide some much needed light relief during these testing times, and I promise not to make any more videos about Hull City for a while. Thank you all for watching. If you did enjoy this video, then I would be more than grateful if you decided to hit the like button, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications for HITC Sevens.